Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, Dave from California. Thanks for joining again. Really appreciate it. Hi, Casa. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much. Obviously, if you haven't joined me here before and you're wondering why I have an Australian accent, hi, Dale. Good to see you. It's because I'm in Australia. So I'm in Brisbane, Australia, just for those people who don't know. Hi, Dale. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate that. So thank you, everyone, for coming to my Substack Live. Obviously, there's a lot been happening in America at the moment. A lot of things happening in America, and not a lot of good things happening in America, unfortunately, which is a shame. But yeah, so I thought I'd start with obviously the big story that's been going on with Alex Pretti, who was murdered by ICE a few days ago now, and yeah, and basically talk a little bit about that and the reaction from MAGA, and I guess the biggest thing I've noticed is that I seem to notice is that Trump is trying to play like the innocent guy, like this all sort of happened, out of his control, and that Trump is someone who loves, he came out today, he said, I love everyone from all sides, and this like complete gaslighting that somehow Trump hadn't incited all this to begin with is just complete and utter craziness, right? I mean, he's coming out now and he's acting like the moderator, like the peace guy who's like, oh, you know, oh, it's gone too far. I can't believe this has happened. It's like he's had no control over this whatsoever. I know it's really bad, but it's almost comical the way. I mean, the whole ICE thing. I mean, in America has been around for a very long time, right, in the United States. And how ICE behaves depends on the leadership, right? So ICE behaves a certain way under Barack Obama. ICE behaves a certain way under Joe Biden, and ICE is behaving the way it is now because it's the direction from the top. Trump, when you call undocumented immigrants terrorists, hi Kimmy, thanks so much for joining, Kimmy. When you call undocumented undocumented immigrants terrorists, and then you dehumanize those people, right? And then you call protesters, hi Stephen, thanks for joining, and you call protesters terrorists, right? And they've been doing this for a long time. Anybody who opposes Trump, any protest, everyone would remember the No Kings protests that you had a couple of months ago. And before the protest happened, you had Trump, Ted Cruz, Stephen Miller, Christine Noem, all these people coming out and saying that the No Kings protest was going to be a bunch of radicals. Hi, Kim, good to see you. It was going to be a bunch of radicals, left-wing Marxists. It was going to be Hamas supporters, all this sort of stuff. Then the No Kings protest, then the No King protest actually happens, right? And it ends up, then they go from that to going, oh, it was just a bunch of boomer, rich hippies, right? So they went from Hamas supporters to boomer hippies, right? So they've been demonizing protests for a very long time. Even before this ICE thing, right? They've been demonizing protesters. So any type of protest from the left since Trump has been elected, that they've tied it to Hamas, terrorism, radicals, all these, domestic terrorists, all this sort of stuff. So what happens is that and then on top of that, Trump talks about immigrants the same way he talks probably talks about them worse than he does the American protesters. And then, of course, ICE is getting its directions from Trump, Christine Noem. It's getting it from people like Stephen Miller. Hi, Izzy. Thanks. Hi, Naomi. Thanks for joining. And it's getting its direction from all these people. Hi, T. Good to see you again, T. Thanks a lot for coming. And it's getting its. Hi, me. Hi, Sandra. Sorry, not me. Hi, Sandra. Good to see you. Hi, Marnie. Good to see you too. Hi, Maura Kennedy. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. And hi, thanks, Sandra, for joining. I'm just talking about, so for those who are just joining now, I'm basically just talking about how Trump and the Trump administration have been demonizing protesters in America for so long, even before ICE, that hi, thanks, Marnie, um, that they've been protesting. They've been demonizing the protesters for so long. Thanks, T. Going back to the No Kings protest, going back to other types of protests that have been in the United States, and whenever there's been protests, it's always been met with the Trump administration calling them Hamas supporters or calling them domestic terrorists or un-American. And so when you have this sort of thing coming from the top all the time, from Trump, coming from Kristi Noem, coming from Stephen Miller, I think, in my opinion, Stephen Miller is probably. Hi, Joanne. Thanks for joining. I think, in my opinion, Stephen Miller is the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. Now, the reason I think that is because Trump, as bad as Trump is, Trump does taco. He's a taco, right? He chickens out, right? So the only positive thing about Trump is that Trump is very worried about optics, right? He's very worried about optics. He does. If he starts seeing the media go against him, and he starts seeing a lot of that sort of stuff happening, he will then pull back. Like we saw that in Greenland. In Greenland, he wanted to invade Greenland, and then there was a lot of pressure coming from inside the Republican Party. There was a lot of pressure coming from European leaders, and then he pulled away from invading Greenland to putting tariffs on 8 countries in Europe who supported them, and then he got more pushback, and then he pulled back out of that. So that's the only thing about Trump. If this was Stephen Miller, who was the president, I don't think we'd be seeing any of that. Stephen Miller would not be backtracking at all. He wouldn't be doing any of that. In fact, I think he would be doubling down. So I do think people now, in saying that, I don't think Stephen Miller would ever be, or I hope not. I would like to think that even though Trump, as bad as he is, was elected, I would like to think that Stephen Miller wouldn't be elected. But who knows? Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, so I guess I agree. Stephen Miller is pure evil, but so is Russ Boyd, even though he's more in the dark shadows behind Miller. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah, exactly, Marty. And look, a lot of this stuff you're seeing at the moment. I mean, what annoys me about how people around Trump react is that Trump basically tries to pretend like now, as much as Trump will sometimes move away, like he'll backtrack from things. I mean, it doesn't take away from the fact that he instigated those things. He started those things, right? Um, he for months and months, Trump was demonizing protesters, and now that we've seen Renee Good get killed, and we saw Alex Pretti get killed, and then a lot of Republicans were coming out against him. A lot of the even right wing media, the Wall Street Journal, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, and a lot of the. Hi, Peter. Thanks for joining. Of course, Rupert Murdoch owns Wall Street Journal. Thanks, Neil. Thanks for joining. And they came out and did an editorial against Trump, which is unusual for the Wall Street Journal to do. And then on top of that, you had other right wing media come out against Trump, saying that Kristi Noem. But again, a lot of what they do is they don't blame Trump. They don't blame Trump. They blame the people around Trump. So they'll blame Kristi. Let's fire Kristi Noem, get rid of Stephen Miller, get rid of Greg Bavino from ICE, get rid of all these people. But what they're not saying is that the reason they're there is because Trump put them there, right? And then Trump comes in and then tries to act like the man of reason. Like he comes in as like, oh, look, I don't agree. I don't agree that it was an assassin attempt, right? I don't agree. Or maybe Trump picked all of them. Exactly, Dave. Exactly. He picks them all. He demonizes all these people, the protesters and all that, right? He even goes along with the initial, like remember with Renee Good, he went along with all that stuff, right? But he pushes back once he realizes it because Trump at the end of the day, does care about optics, right? He does care about optics, and it's probably the only positive thing about Trump, right? Now, in saying that, if Trump, this is so much of how bad Trump, that's because he's an imbecile. Yeah, exactly. The thing about Trump is if his popularity stayed really high, right? If Trump's popularity stayed really high, and even though that's true, if Trump's popularity stayed really high, then he wouldn't care about any of this stuff, right? Yeah, it's on Trump. Exactly, Izzy. It is on Trump. Yeah. Thanks, Eddie, for joining. So a lot of this stuff that we're seeing was initiated by Trump, and just because, hi, Mary, good to see you. Just because Trump comes in later, scapegoats, it's never Trump, it's always someone else his entire life. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, Sandra. And the thing is, at the end of the day, Trump can't try just because he surrounds himself with crazy people, and then and I think to some degree, I think to some degree, it's a good morning, everyone from Melbourne, Australia. Mary's also from Australia. Yeah, so I think in the same way, I think that Trump surrounds himself with so many crazy people, and he encourages those people to say crazy things, right? That at the end of it, he can come in and go like it's like someone starting a fight between two people in the playground at school, right? He initiates the fight, he creates the fight, and then he comes in. He's like that person who like sets a home on fire and then comes in and tries to like help take it out. And then we're all supposed to go, Trump, oh, thank you. Thanks for thanks for helping put out that fire that he started. Is it Trump picking the people? Or is it someone behind the scenes? Yeah. I mean, I do agree, Neil, that I do agree that there is, I think Stephen Miller, it's not just Stephen Miller. I think Trump is being influenced by a lot of people around him. And it's not just Stephen Miller. I think it's people like even Marco Rubio when it came to Venezuela. I don't think I don't think Trump cares about Venezuela. I don't think Trump cares about Cuba. In fact, when Barack Obama was in power and he wanted to do business with Cuba, Trump and the Republican Party was like, what's Obama doing wanting to do deals with Cuba, business with Cuba? That's so anti-American. And 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 Trump at the time wasn't a politician, came out and defended Obama and said, why wouldn't you want to do business with Cuba? We could, do business with them, make money out of them, all that sort of stuff. So this thing about Venezuela, in my opinion, was about Marco Rubio, was about all those people with backgrounds from Cuba, like people like Marco Rubio. Joe is the Federalist, big influence on the Chandran regime. Is a Federalist society? Yeah, I think there's a. I don't think there's one. I think you could easily simplify it to say there's one person. It's Stephen Miller. It's this and that. I actually think it's a whole bunch of different people. I don't think there's one person who's influencing Trump. I think at the end of the day, he's I think Trump can be manipulated. I think Trump is malleable. He can change his mind. I think that's a good thing in one small way. I think it's also a very bad thing. He takes what billionaires want to, because, yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, so the fact that Trump can change his mind, the fact that Trump is not an ideologue, like, say, Marco Rubio's, it can be a positive thing, because at the end of the day, Marco Rubio would probably like boots on the ground in Venezuela. I think he would, because I think he wants to. Hey, how are you doing today? Yeah, hi, how you going? Good to see you. And so, yeah, so I think he's been influenced by a lot of people. Marco Rubio, I think, had to do with Venezuela. I think a lot of the stuff with ICE and immigrants is coming from Stephen Miller. So I think there's different influences from different people, right? I think Stephen Miller. Hi, Natalie. Good to see you. Stephen Miller. Trump is actually doesn't care about anything unless it's benefits. He can't. We all see. He's easy manipulation. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, yeah. He doesn't. Trump doesn't care about things for his own, for because he thinks they're right or wrong. He cares about it because he does care about optics. He does want to be seen as popular. and he does want to be seen as he I do think he thinks about his legacy a bit. I think he does want to be seen as the greatest, in his own head, like, crazy as it is. I think he does think like that. So I do think that, but the but I think also with Trump is that he's so much around like Fox News, and he's around people who just say yes to him all the time and all that sort of stuff, that he doesn't really even understand what's going on. There's no doubt about it. Trump is a con artist. Trump wants to be like a would-be dictator, all this sort of stuff. But he's also an idiot. There's no doubt in the world that Trump is an idiot, right? He doesn't understand world politics. Greetings from Michigan. Hi, good to see you, the trajectory. Good to see you again. Thanks for coming back from Michigan. I'm assuming it's pretty cold there from the Burr. Must be freezing. It's actually really, really hot in Brisbane, Australia. Yeah, yeah, very hot in Brisbane, Australia. So yeah, so he's a lunatic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he is a lunatic. But I think, and the thing about the whole undocumented, hi Natalie. The thing about the whole hi Car, good to see you. The thing about the whole undocumented illegal people coming in is that I think what Trump did. So if you look at two things, right? On the one hand, there are a lot. He's pretty much closed the border. Trump has pretty much closed the border between the United States and Mexico. But in terms of how many people, undocumented people, he's kicking out of the country, it's actually not even much. I think it's about the same as Biden, or even less than Biden in his last year. So he's not actually kicking out as many people as he wanted to. So, so what I think he always knew that that was going to be a hard thing to do. So what I think the the strategy from Trump and Stephen Miller and all those, hi William, good to see you, was that they knew they couldn't kick out the type of the percentage of people they want to kick out. So what they did is they created this thing where they made these really high profile cases, right? And they got ICE in there, and they did all this sort of stuff, and they created all this hell. Joe, I'm becoming more concerned about the 30% Americans still support Trump. With that many in the country on board with this plus, what does the country and the world have? Um, yeah, I mean, Neil, I still think that 30%. Um, well, I will say this: Trump has the support of MAGA, but he doesn't have the support. Trump didn't win because of the hardcore MAGA supporters. Trump won because of independents and swing voters, and most of those have moved away from him now. So, if the election were held tomorrow, Trump would lose the election. He also lost young people, and he's also lost Latinos. So, I think a lot of the people that Trump needs to win, he doesn't have any more to win the next election. So I do think that Trump wouldn't win another election. So I wouldn't feel that, the 30% of Americans who support Trump. I don't know if it's 30%, to be honest with you. I don't know if it's that. If it's that, that seems a bit high, because Trump got 30% of eligible voters at the last election, but that was with swing voters and independents and Latinos and young people on his side, and most of them have left. So I think it's closer to like 20% now, or even a little bit lower. The key must be to get the 30% who didn't vote to do. Yeah, exactly. Well, not only that, but Neil, it's not just that. It's the swing voters and independents have moved away from Trump. They no longer support him. They have moved away from him in massive numbers, right? They've come back to the Democrats. Young people have now moved away from him, Neil, and also Latino voters have also moved away from him. So he doesn't have the same supporters. What Trump has kept is Republican voters, right? A lot of Republican voters have stayed with Trump, although it usually sits around 91, 92, 93% in terms of Republicans who vote for Trump. That has dropped a little bit to like the late 80s. Now, that seems not too bad. But for Trump, uh, a drop of 4 or 5% amongst Republicans is a very, very big drop. Because remember, Trump didn't win because of Republicans. Trump won because of swing voters and independents, and they've moved away from him. So it's no longer 30%. Yeah. So don't I think it's important not to think of every single person who voted for Trump as MAGA, because it's not. There were many people who voted for Trump who didn't vote for him because they were going to his rallies. They weren't going to his rallies. They weren't putting on Trump hats. None of that. The majority of people who voted for Trump voted for him based on inflation, and they blamed Joe Biden for inflation and all that. And a lot of people don't follow politics very closely. It's always, I have to say this all the time, and I think it's really important that for people like us, who spend a lot of time thinking about politics. Hi, Nicole. Good to see you. Hi, Joyce. Connie. A lot of people like us who spend a lot of time thinking about politics and writing, and reading about politics is you always have to remind yourself is that the majority of Americans are not doing that. They're not thinking like we are. They're not reading stuff like that at all. In fact, most of them are not. Hi, Joyce. Most of them aren't paying attention to politics at all. Now imagine this. Imagine you're in your 30s or you're in your 40s, right? Hi, Nicole. You're in your 30s, you're in your 40s, you've got 2 or 3 children, right? You're not rich, so you're working full time. You don't have a lot of free time. It's all about the kids going to school. It's all about working. It's all about this and that. You don't have time to go on Substack Live and watch videos or you read the New York Times or do this. You just don't, most people don't have that sort of time. So it's always important to understand that it's easy to think that everyone is absorbing the same amount of news that we are. But when you realize that most people aren't, it actually makes me feel better to some degree, because it makes me feel better and worse. It makes me feel better and worse. Better because I know a lot of people didn't vote for Trump because they liked him. They voted for him because they just blamed whoever was in power for their life being bad. Now, the problem for Trump is that now that he's in power, he's getting blamed for a lot of things that are going bad. I'm talking about the economy mostly, right? He's been blamed for a lot of the economy stuff. Now, I will give you. I think the only problem with this, there is a thing going on in the world at the moment. He's trying very hard to prevent future elections. All that is true, but he makes it such that people could put banking on them not to vote. Yeah, is he? I don't think he's going to stop people from voting. Is he? I really don't. If you look at all these special elections that have been happening this year, there's been a lot. I think there's been like 14 or 15 special elections. Democrats did nothing. Yeah, they did not stop them from voting. In fact, Democrats came out to vote in record numbers. I don't think it's going to happen, Izzy. I really think Democrats are going to come out in massive numbers to vote in the midterms. I think the problem is that I think what happened, and he blames Biden and says everything is great. Yeah. And again, Dave, blaming the other person doesn't work, because Joe Biden, and I'm not criticizing Joe Biden, because inflation wasn't his fault. It was post-COVID inflation affected every country on the planet. But when Joe Biden and the Trump and the Biden administration was saying, "Hey, you know, um, you know, everything's, I think, Joe Biden was saying, look, it's not really our fault. It's because of COVID and all this sort of stuff." Most people are not paying attention to that information, right? They just blame who's ever in power. Your hair looks good, Joe. Oh, thanks, Kimmy. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. Yeah. Um, yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. A compliment to me instead of Nibbles, my dog. Thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, so I think from that point of view, I think I personally would have, if I was in a different room today, no couch for Nibbles. No, it's the same room. It's the same room. I'm just facing it. The Nibbles is in that couch, and you wouldn't be able to see her anyway. I'm in the same room though. I'm just facing a different direction. Yeah. Um. So yeah. So yeah. Thanks, Kimmy. But yeah. So I mean, I, in my personal opinion, I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people in America, and I get this because I'm Australian, and it's easy for me to say this because I'm not living in Australia. Bovino kicked to the curb. No one will be impeached or demoted to Minnesota. Under the bus, time shifting news cycle away from the exit polls. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I really do think, um, I really do think there are positives in America at the moment. I'm not saying obviously there's a lot of negatives, but yeah, okay, just check. Yeah, Nibble's just on the couch there. Yeah, she might pop her head up. I do think there's going to be a lot of people who come out in the midterms. I think more and more Americans are seeing what's happening. More and more Americans are seeing what's happening with Donald Trump and ICE and all that, and and I think there's a very good position now. Now I've got to say this. I think the midterms, like it Nibbles, yeah. I think midterms are going to be a big win for the Democrats. I think JD Vance is basically um, gonna. I always thought JD Vance would win the primaries at the next election for the Republicans, but I'm starting to think that might be less and less. And the reason that I think that is because he's stuck himself so closely to Trump without no pushback that everything that's going on now, if you're Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer or Gavin Newsom at the next election, you can just say like I don't know if you've noticed this, but Josh Shapiro has already started campaigning. And if you watch what Josh Shapiro says, it will be Don. Yeah, if you watch what Josh Shapiro says all the time, he's already campaigning for the next election, and he's already campaigning like he's up against JD Vance. He always talks about listen to what Josh Shapiro says, right? He says it all the time. He's now starting to say, so Josh Shapiro will be interviewed, and he's been interviewed a couple of times recently, and they'll be talking about ICE. Now, he could go after Trump, he could go after Kristi Noem, he could go after any person in the Trump party to criticize about ICE, but the person he goes to is JD Vance. Why is he going to JD Vance? Because that's who he thinks he's going to be going to at the next election. So when he was asked about ICE, he said he didn't mention Trump, he didn't mention because he went straight. He said, you know what the thing is? He said, JD Vance is such a sycophant that he just says yes to whatever Trump says. He's really weak. He agrees with everything Trump says. So his position at the next election is going to be JD Vance is basically Trump, and JD Vance has to own everything that Trump does because whenever something happens, JD Vance comes out. I heard today that Hawley will run and Trump isn't happy about it. Right? Okay, yeah. I don't think Josh Hawley would win. Vance vastly unpopular. Yeah. Well, unpopular. Not in MAGA. MAGA do think JD Vance is the best option after Trump. JD not separating himself from Trump will be exactly T. What T just said is exactly right. When Joe Biden was asked, when Kamala Harris was asked during an interview when she was running for election, would you do anything different to Joe Biden? What she shouldn't have said is no, I would do everything the same. Was the worst answer she should have gave. She didn't have to throw Joe Biden under the bus, but she still has to separate herself from the previous person, right? So you can't like Joe Biden at that stage was very unpopular amongst the American electorate. And if your previous leader is unpopular against the American electorate, and you go on TV and you go on TV and say, "Well, I'm going to do the same thing as Joe Biden, even though he's wildly unpopular in America," that's like the craziest thing you could do, right? That's the craziest thing. So JD Vance is now doing that, but on a much bigger scale. So Josh Shapiro has picked that up very smartly, has picked that up. He's also talking like what should have said she's on her own person. Yeah, she said she's her own person. She's got her own ideas and all that. Yeah. So you've got to separate yourself. Josh Shapiro is going to have a lot of pushback from Dems pissed off at Israel's abusive tactics against, and they'll be like, yeah, Natalie, I do agree, but I still I still think that the majority of Democrats would still get behind Josh Shapiro. I really do. I do think I I do think it. The reason is because um, I think Josh Shapiro is very popular in Pennsylvania. He's very popular in the Midwest. He doesn't have a lot of the baggage that some other Democrats do in regards to, for example, BLM or all that sort of stuff. He doesn't have that sort of stuff, so he could do well. Now you got to remember that. Now the only problem for me is Josh Shapiro in the primaries. Who knows? Like, if the base doesn't come out against Josh Shapiro, it comes out, lets him win. Who knows? But Gavin Newsom is also very pro-Israel, very, very pro-Israel, and so all the options are going to be pro-Israel, right? So all the top options are pro-Israel. So at the end of the day, Democrats are going to have to basically decide on domestic stuff first. In my opinion, they should get yeah. The last thing Democrats should do is what they did at the last election, is where you had people vote against Kamala Harris and vote for the Greens, right? Or not vote at all because of Israel. I think they agree with Newsom for the press. Yeah. So I mean, at the end of the day, like, you can't, in my opinion, you can't have voted for the Greens or abstain from voting just because of Israel, because of what happened in Israel, and then say, well, Trump's an authoritarian. At the end of the day, you have to vote for the lesser of two evils, because there's never going to be a candidate that ticks all the boxes of what you want. So, in my opinion, I think the top candidates are Josh Shapiro, Gavin Newsom. I'm hearing from many Dems that they're drawing a line when it comes to Israel. Yeah, well, look, at the end of the day, those people who are drawing the line at Israel have to take responsibility if JD Vance gets elected. They have to take responsibility if JD Vance gets elected. You can't think Trump is an authoritarian. If I hear someone say to me, I voted for the Greens, right, because I didn't want to vote for Kamala because of Israel, and they're going around screaming about Trump being authoritarian. Well, I don't know what to say to those people. You know what I mean? I mean, we don't live in a perfect world. The person I voted for in Australia, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, for centre left, there are things that he does that I don't agree with. But the idea that I'm going to only vote for someone who I only agree with, like, most of the time, I vote for the lesser of two evils, because that's the rule. That's the rule life that we live in, right? And if you want to vote for a smaller party, or a smaller party that doesn't, that's fine. You can do that, but you have to take. So you can't then go around and say, "Well, I can't believe Trump was elected," right? Because you're a part of that. You helped Trump get elected by not voting for Kamala Harris at the last election. So I don't know. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm not saying you should not vote for the Greens if that's what you want to do. But you have to be realistic. You helped Trump get elected, right? Um, so that's just I'm just a pragmatist when it comes to politics. I think you have to vote for. I would much rather Josh Shapiro or Gavin Newsom become president of the United States than JD Vance, because I want to see good things happen to America. Also, the fact of the matter is, when it comes to Israel, whether you pick a Democrat or Republican, you're probably not going to get much of a difference, right? Natalie Wright, we'll have to remember, Palestinians are humans and not be erased on basis for human rights. We're not. In America, the vote goes for the wallet normally, but these are not normal times. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Donna. Thanks for joining. Exactly. Yeah. Most people are gonna vote on. Most people are gonna vote on economics. It's just 100% true. Yeah. Hi, Donna. Most people just vote on economics. It's not. It's true in America. It's true in Australia. It's true in Europe, in Scandinavia. People vote on economics, right? So, yeah. So I think, in my opinion, I would like to see someone like I would like to see someone like Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer or something like that, only because I think they got the best chance of winning the best chance of winning the election. The reason I'm hearing is mainly because if is with throwing Palestinians on the bus, those same leaders will be throwing other undesirable in USA. Yeah, I see. I don't agree with that, Natalie, because I think people in Israel and people from that region, they. I mean, I've even heard Josh Shapiro show sympathy towards people in Palestine. Now, I know that most people wouldn't agree with what he does or he says and stuff like that, but you know, I mean, in Australia, for example, we just had in Australia, we had a massive terrorist attack against Jewish people here only like a month ago, where like I think 30 or 40, and the people that killed them didn't kill them because they were pro-Israel. They killed them because they were Jewish. They literally killed them because they were Jewish. So, I think, in my opinion, I think it's not just a one-way street when it comes to Israel and Palestine. I think Benjamin Netanyahu absolutely went over the top in what he did with Palestine. I think he's basically a corrupt person, all that. But at the same time, I don't think it's all like, I think what they did against the Palestinians, yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. So I think it's hard, if you're a Jewish person like Josh Shapiro and you see Jewish people being like, yeah, you're right, Joe, but many Americans fail to realize that being so rich on the Gaza issue, they've actually caused the greater evil, which is that now all the land will be taken away and Trump's resorts will be built. Yeah, not a good trade off. Better vote for the person who won't be driven to profits. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. You're not going to get, you're never going to get an American president who's like, Bernie Sanders or it's been cold here in Charleston here, but not bad. Yeah, so you're never going to get an American president who's going to be like, like Zoran Mandani. It's just not going to happen in America. So, in my opinion, you always got to I would always go for someone like, on basically domestic policies, healthcare, the economy, not using ICE to go after its own people, being when it comes to overseas, um, being supportive of Europe, Scandinavia, being allies with our fellow Western countries, supporting Ukraine. All those sort of things are really important to me because I don't want to see the United States, threatening Greenland or Denmark with military action. I think those things are just, they're just lunatic stuff to think about. But yeah, glad you're okay. Yeah, but so yeah, so I guess in that opinion, I'm saying that I do think Josh Shapiro might be a good option, Gretchen Whitmer and all that. In the only good thing, about Trump going after a lot of people in Europe, like for example, is that in the UK at the moment, I don't know, you probably don't follow UK politics, but I think it's important to see that because what generally happens is um, you will see that a lot of trends that happen around Europe, Australia, they can affect what happens in America as well. And what you're seeing at the moment is in the UK, the far right wing party, Joe, just to let you know, stupid demented Trump was leaving for Iowa and said you can't carry guns because of the poor VNS. That was, yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, Donna. And look, the whole Second Amendment thing. Look, as an Australian, right? Let me give you my bigger picture version. Not about what happened recently, but just like I don't believe, I don't, I'm not for guns. I don't think people should be able to carry guns. I don't, but I'm saying that as an Australian, where we have strict gun laws in Australia, you can't go purchase a gun for self defense. There are reasons you can have guns in Australia. You can have guns in Australia if you want to, if you're like live on a farm or you join a gun club and it's a sport, but you can't go into a gun shop and say I want a gun for protection. Now, but I'm but uh yeah, so again, So, but you live in America, and in America, the law says that, especially in Minnesota, that you can actually carry a gun, a concealed. He had a concealed gun, and so it was 100% legal what he did. And on top of that, it's even worse because it's coming from MAGA, who are all about the Second Amendment. Kyle Rittenhouse, right? You saw, during COVID, there was all these protests during COVID about COVID lockdowns and all this sort of stuff, and they come out with their big guns, and MAGA was like, oh my God, isn't it amazing? We can carry our guns, and you know, not when they went into the Capitol, but outside the Capitol on January 6th, they were carrying guns. So they've all been for guns, except for this. Now, what Trump said about he shouldn't have been carrying a gun into that protest is basically goes against everything the NRA stands for, everything what Kyle Rittenhouse stands for, everything that Fox News stands for, all these people stand for. And yet, because it was a liberal, the double standards, the double standards is amazing. Now, it's just ridiculous, right? And again, I'm saying this as someone who doesn't believe people should have guns, but I live in Australia. I don't live in America. So you have different laws. So, he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't pull out his gun. He just had it concealed. And again, Virginia also has concealed gun carry laws on its books, and churches were, yeah, exactly. So, I jumped all over. It's shocking. Your Second Amendment when it convenient. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's all Second Amendment. The other thing is the First Amendment, right? So when Charlie Kirk was murdered, afterwards, Pam Bondi went on TV, and Pam Bondi, hi, John, and here, Pam Bondi started talking about hate laws in America. She started saying we need to bring in hate laws. Then Donald Trump came in after Charlie Kirk because people were saying things about him online, and then Donald Trump talked about hate laws. Now remember, the whole thing about the First Amendment is that hate laws don't exist. Hate laws is something that MAGA always said about Democrats, saying, "Well, we don't have hate laws in Australia. It's all about if you're going to incite violence, you can't do that. You can have defamation stuff, you can't do that. But you're allowed to hate someone. You're allowed to say hateful things about someone. That was the whole part of the First Amendment. Yet Pam Bondi goes on TV and says, "Well, it was hateful." Again, they completely contradicted themselves because they were going after the Biden administration for hate laws. Then they get into power and they talk about hate laws. Then we have the Alex Pretti thing that happens. Suddenly, then you have Kyle Rittenhouse. On the one hand, Kyle Rittenhouse comes in. Wasn't a concealed carry gun? He had this like rifle, walking around with this massive rifle. You have MAGA going to COVID vaccine protests with guns. At January 6th, they're carrying guns over and over again. And they said, well, it's about the Second Amendment rights, right? And guess what? It was the Republicans who said the Democrats want to take your guns away. Well, the only people who want to take your guns away from a protest is the person that the NRA endorsed. The NRA endorsed the president who wants to take people's guns away from showing up at protest concealed. Like, this is insane, right? Everything that the NRA, everything that MAGA accused the Democrats of doing, whether it came to the First Amendment or the Second Amendment, is coming true. But it's not coming true because of Kamala Harris. It's coming true because they voted in Donald Trump, who wants to take guns away from people at peaceful protests and wants to take the First Amendment and wants to put in hate laws, which is something that they hated before. They fired comedians for making fun of him, right? They fired Jimmy Kimmel. They fired Colbert for making fun of him. They're going after the media, right, as well. Again, every accusation is a confession when it comes to MAGA. They're going after, all these people that they didn't like. They absolutely have politicized the justice system. Some of their court cases they're doing is so bad that the Trump supporting judges are like laughing at him. They're like throwing him out with laughter. You've got Trump talking about, um, you got Trump talking about going after Tim Walz, putting Tim Walz in jail. Remember, he said he's going to put Tim Walz in jail because of the protests and because of what happened with the thing. And then, so what? This is what happens. Trump rolls up his base. So I will say this. I think it's pretty obvious now that Trump's base, I'm talking about his hardcore base, is probably more crazy than he is. Believe it or not, I think his base is more crazy than Trump. And how do I know this? Well, Trump will say things like, I want to invade Greenland. And then when Trump pulls away from invading Greenland, they go, what are you doing? Why aren't you invading Greenland? Right? They get upset at him because he didn't invade Greenland. When Trump pushed back, when Trump was saying, I want Tim Walz in jail, right? He kept saying that and they all kept sharing, oh, Tim Walz is going to go to jail. They're going to prosecute him. And then a couple of days ago, Trump posts something on Truth Social, which is like, I had a really good conversation with Tim Walz today. It was a very productive conversation. And we've decided, it was like really nice and all this and like Tim Walz. And of course, when they were like, wait a sec, I thought you were going to put Tim Walz in jail. And now you're talking about caving into him. Now you're talking about working with him. Why is he not being prosecuted? Again, his base is more crazy than he is, right? He cultivated a crazier base than he is. He's crazy. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sticking up for Trump. I'm just saying that his base is actually worse than him because whenever he does a taco and pulls back or, he says, I'm going to, arrest this person. I think so too, Joe. Someone said they were saying MAGA was not going to be mean, make the America. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Bannon said he blinked. Exactly. The Stephen Bannons of the world, a lot of the online people of the world, a lot of all those people in the world, they get really bad at Trump. And in fact, a lot of them will say things like, I wish he was the dictator that liberals said he was. I saw an influencer of his on Twitter who has millions of followers, who's a big Trump supporter, I can't remember his name now because I don't really know this guy. But he basically said, after he sent that message to Tim Walz, which was like, let's work together and all this, he said, this is crazy. This is crazy. He said he was going to invade Greenland. He didn't invade Greenland. He said he was going to prosecute Tim Walz. He didn't prosecute Tim Walz. He said he was going to do this. He didn't do that. He said he was going to kick out millions of people out of America. But in fact, he's kicked out less people than Joe Biden did. So a lot of these people are not mad at Trump because he's crazy. They're mad at him because he's not crazy enough and he pulls back, right? So again, and we saw this with January 6th, right? Trump incited the violence on January 6th. He got these people to show up, incited them, but at the end of the day, Trump, as much as Trump did, he set up 7 fake slate of electors. Even Lev Parnes and Stephen Miller is running the show. Yeah. 7 slate fake of electors, January 6th, incited the violence. Even with all that, Trump didn't call the military to overturn the elections. He never did any of that. There was at some stage, Trump had to move aside, right? He moved aside at some stage when he tried every single thing, whether illegal or not illegal. Now, his base were upset at him. In fact, some of the people on January 6th ended up suing Trump because they said he convinced them that he was going to be on their side on January 6th. But then when it happened, he kind of, he never conceded, but he moved aside. The poll numbers are tanking faster than Jesus Christ. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they are. So again, Trump Trump incites his base, and then Trump gets to a certain stage, and then he pushes back. And they hate that about Trump. They hate that about Trump. So they want Trump to go all the way. And so yeah, so they're disappointed in him. Now, this doesn't mean they're going to stop supporting Trump because Trump is the craziest thing they have to what they want. And even though Trump doesn't do or everything that they want, Trump still does enough of it, right? Um, the thing about the thing about the thing about Trump is that I think um, because he's so worried about optics, that's the only good news about Trump. That's the only good thing I think about Trump is that he cares enough about the optics, and therefore, and he does seem to have a ceiling of where he will go. Right, there seems to be some ceiling there, right? Which is why I think eventually Trump will go. I think Trump will go because I think there is a ceiling. As bad as Trump is, as awful as a dictator he does have a ceiling. I think Stephen Miller wouldn't have a ceiling. There would be nowhere that Stephen Miller would probably not go. I think Stephen Miller is probably it's a manipulation tactic. He uses extreme statements to get attention, shock them, and then pulls back like is it rational, reasonable. It's a negotiating tactic, take the most extreme and then move backwards from there. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right, Connie. He does that. Yeah, it's always about him. Yeah, exactly. And and the thing is about Trump is that but the ceiling is up and down like an elevator. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We don't know how we don't know where that ceiling is, but I do feel I'll be honest, I do feel enough hope that the ceiling is low enough that it's not going to destroy America. I really do. I really do believe that because um, Trump Trump's the worst thing that could happen to Trump is he becomes popular, right? Trump is guided to some degree by optics because everything is made for TV with Trump, right? Trump is made for TV. So I think the whole thing is, look, a lot of people on the far right already think that, right? So you probably don't listen to Nick Fuentes. I only read a little bit of what he says because I want to know what the far right thinks about Trump. Well, a lot of people like Nick Fuentes, um, a lot of people like Nick Fuentes, who's on the far right, they will call out Trump all the time, and they it's always good to see and hear you, Joe. I've got to go now. Look forward to seeing you. Thanks, Nally. Good to see you again. Talk to you soon. He bulldozed White House report. Yeah. Um, so the thing about it is, Trump gets bored in meetings. He said that's why he's falls asleep. Exactly right. Yeah, yeah. He doesn't want. It's all TV for Trump. A lot of it's just TV and for Trump. Now, I think a lot of people on the far right, people to the and when I talk about people to the right, to the right, to the right of Trump, like Nick Fuentes and all these type of people is that they actually look at how many undocumented Trump is kicking out, and they've realized it's actually less than Joe Biden in his last. Trump has kicked out less people than Joe Biden did in his last term. Now, a lot of people don't realize that, but a lot of the far right do know that. So they will often say, "Don't fall for Trump's theatrics. He's not actually kicking out that many people." So what he's doing, and this is the part where I actually agree with the far right, is that they've picked up something that is true. Trump is made for TV. So if you can't kick out the amount of people you think you can kick out, because it's almost impossible to do what Trump wants to do. You can't do it. So what he does is that he creates so much madness around ICE and so much craziness around ICE that people stop looking at the numbers and look at the insanity of it, right? So if you're focused in on ICE doing these horrible, horrible things, then you lose sight of the numbers that is kicking out. So it's in fact, it's like, here's a bunch of crazy shit we do, because we don't want you look. We don't want not, and he's not doing it for our sake. He's doing it for his base's sake, and he's doing it for the right's sake because they want to see Trump. Trump came in and said we're going to kick out all these undocumented workers because yes, and all these undocumented workers we're going to do all this. But the fact of the matter is, it's much harder to do it than he realizes it is. So he's created the craziness, and the craziness has tried to is like a smokescreen for the percentage of people he's actually kicking out. Except the far right, yeah, correct, yeah, the far right have picked up on this. The far right are constantly now saying that all this is theatrics and Trump's numbers is less than Joe Biden. So that's the thing that a lot of people are not seeing, that Trump is actually being attacked by the far right. For the goons also get paid per arrest even after letting them go. Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, they do. So even when they arrest someone, they have to let them go. So if you look at the arrests are actually very high, but as Gen X just said, a lot of times they let him go, but it counts as an arrest. It's like they're getting incentivized. But the amount of people who are actually getting undocumented workers being kicked out is actually less than Joe Biden in his last year. So a lot of people don't know the numbers, and it's actually and that because we're seeing so much of the crazy stuff that he's doing now. Of course, there's a lot less people coming in because the border's essentially closed, right? From that point of view. So yeah, so there's that. That's an interesting thing for me that the far right is really going after Trump, and because the numbers aren't quite there that he's giving there. So, and again, I think a lot of Trump. The other thing is you got Ted Cruz. I think it was yesterday or today, and Ted Cruz was talking about what was he talking about? He was talking about Iran, and so they've got a big warship going out to the Middle East, and they're talking about and so you got it's is it less than Joe Biden's compared to Joe's first year? No, no, Dave, it's not. It's the last. So it's more than It's more than Joe Biden's for the first 3 years, but it's less than the last year because Joe Biden in his last year realized realized that there was too many undocumented workers coming in, and it was working against him in the election. So he tried to bring in policies, and then he tried that was still probably not that yeah, and so basically he tried in the last year. Joe Biden uh, tried to kick out as many undocumented workers as he could. But yeah, so I'm comparing it to the last year, not the first 3 year. And also there was obviously COVID as well as Gen X said. So um, I think I think we know something. I'll just go back to Ted Cruz and I'll go back to something else. Is that Ted Cruz basically was saying that he sent a post out on Twitter and he said, we need to arm the protesters in Iran, right? Now, he wants to arm the protesters in Iran with guns. He wants America to give guns to the protesters in Iran. But in America, he was defending the murder of a protester who showed up with a gun, concealed, perfectly legal, and was then murdered by ICE. The hypocrisy is just all the time, right? He wants to help arm protesters in Iran while he takes away the guns. This is Ted Cruz from Texas, by the way, the big Second Amendment guy. So again, it's so much of it is hypocrisy and all that stuff. Um, so, uh, so just before I go, I'll just talk about one more thing, and that is, I think all this immigration stuff all around the world. We're seeing the rise of Obama kept Ebola at bay and Trump opened a wide door. Yeah, exactly right. And I think we're seeing all this far right wing parties all around the world come to power, or not come to power, but getting high amounts of polling numbers. And I think the next Democrat is a very good opening for the next Democrat at the next election to come in and say, like maybe someone like Josh Shapiro or Gavin Newsom to come in and say, look, I concede there was too much chaos at the border under Joe Biden, because you have to concede that, right? If you do not concede that, what's going to happen is JD Vance or someone else is going to say, well, they're going to go back to what it was like under Joe Biden. The majority of the electorate in America don't want chaos at the border. They don't want undocumented workers who have created crimes. They're not there, right? But they also don't want the madness of the Trump administration murdering American citizens, picking up people from Home Depots, children, all that sort of stuff. So there is a really good opening for a Democrat to come in and not say that you're going to go back to Biden, not going to go back to Biden, but also what Trump did was just complete insanity. So I think that's where the American people are. And when I say the American people, I'm talking about swing voters, Democrats. They don't want to go back. They don't want Joe Biden, and they don't want the Trump. Yeah, of course, right. But right now, there's more people actually saying, "But abolish the thing." Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But a lot of people, say, doesn't mean that they want to abolish ICE because of what they're doing. But that doesn't mean that they will tear it down, rebuild back. Just because people say abolish ICE doesn't mean that they want to. That if suddenly Josh Shapiro got into power, and then you started seeing thousands of people coming over the border, and you started seeing going back the chaos again, what you saw at the border, they're not going to be happy with it. I guarantee you they're not going to be happy with that. So a Democrat needs to come in, concede that Joe Biden didn't get it right. You have to concede that, because otherwise you get painted as another Joe Biden. But it's such a great opening for a Democrat, because you say, we shouldn't be using ICE to murder our own people. We shouldn't be showing up at Home Depots. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he does. Yeah. So we don't want to be going back. And it's not about Joe Biden personally, but I'm just saying the Democratic policies of back in those days. And by the way, this is the same thing in the UK, Europe, Scandinavia. This is the obvious thing. This is the obvious thing that is happening all around the Western world. You can't have, as soon as people start to see chaos at the border, they will go to the far right, right? So the best way to stop people from going to the far right is to create a sense of control. You have control of your borders, but you respect, and what you do then is, if you have control of your borders, you can then have more progressive policies towards immigrants, because if you control the borders, people will be more open to, okay, well, we know who's coming in, we know how many people coming in, and then you can go, but immigrants are great for this, immigrants are great for this, and but as soon as chaos happens, or perceived chaos happens, they will go to the far right. So there is no choice. Again, it's like the Israel thing, right? You can be like, oh, don't worry about them. Don't worry about them, let them in and stuff like that. Great. You will never win that argument in any Western country. There is not a Western country on this planet who wants to agree with that. I hope these get better or we're in trouble. Yeah, exactly. So you have to go with we have to control our borders. Every Western nation has to say that, whether you're centre-left government. And I'll give you an example. There is one country, and I've said this 100 times before, that the far right doesn't exist, and that is in Denmark. And the Prime Minister there is actually a progressive, but she's strong on borders. She's not strong on kicking out immigrants. She's not doing what Trump is doing or any of that. But she's strong on, she wants to know who's coming into the country, bang, bang. She will say so, and she gets the support. So therefore, the far right no one's interested in the far right, because all the far right, if you take away immigration from the far right, they don't exist. Think about a far right wing group that exists without immigration being a major issue. It doesn't. The far right wing groups can only exist when it's a perceived chaos of the borders and inflation, or those two things together, like economic issues. economic issues and chaos at the border. When you get those two things together, the far right will become a big issue in those countries. So centre left parties have to decide on um, what you have to concede that particular point. Yeah, we need the average American party to fight for the majority of Americans who have been forgotten. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you need to the Democratic Party need to neutralize the that you should watch about Bush Senior. I don't know, he was for immigrants paying taxes, working, getting healthcare, and even living here part time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now Obama, how is New Zealand? Yeah, New Zealand's. I think New Zealand's doing okay at the moment. I don't really follow much politics in New Zealand at the moment, but yeah, I think they're doing okay. But what was I saying? Yeah, but Obama, I kind of felt like in terms of rhetoric, Obama hit the right spot for America. He came in, right? He came in and he said, and he kind of criticized there was too many immigrants coming from um, undocumented immigrants coming under George W. Bush. He actually said there was too many, could believe it or not. But at the same time, he was he wasn't going to Home Depots. He wasn't telling ICE to like kill their citizens. I saw this speech the other day that Obama did on immigration, and it hit the right balance. Yeah, you hit the right balance of we need to control our borders. We need to know who's coming into the country. We can't do this and then that. However, also saying very positive things and all that sort of stuff. I think Obama is probably where the majority of Americans are in terms of immigration, right? I think he is probably there, right? So if someone came in with Obama type policies, I think that would be the person. Yeah, that would be the person who would win the election. So yeah. So and by the way, that's a thing all around the world. And then you neutralize. You either get rid of ICE, or if you don't want to get rid of ICE, you just. The thing about ICE to me is ICE is not about just the people that work there. Um, ICE is not just about the people. ICE is about who's at the top, right? Like if ICE is being controlled by Trump, then it's going to become like a police state. Um, Still is cool and Trump can't stand. Yeah, that's the truth. But have to fix the economy or no one cares. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. But I believe that immigration is tied in with the economy, right? Immigration is tied in with the economy. So if you're saying if you're not talking about strong, if you're not talking, the right uses immigration as a way to swing everything to the right. I don't have a lot of faith that Democrats can address it nationally like you're talking. I actually think they could. I actually think they could because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, mostly Joe Biden, ignored it for 3 years, right? They literally ignored the border for 3 years, and whenever someone would talk about it, they would pretend like it wasn't an issue. Um, so and in fact, that's unusual for an American Democratic president because Obama, in his 8 years, did talk about immigration a lot, and he held that sort of medium ground, right? So when Joe Biden didn't talk about it, what happened is um, when Biden didn't talk about it, then what happened is they conceded the ground to Trump and to MAGA. Um, so they conceded the ground to Trump and MAGA. And then in the last year, when they realized it was becoming a big issue, they tried to fix it. They tried to put things through Congress and they made ICE kick out more undocumented workers, but it was too late. They left it to the last year. So again, if a Democrat comes in and he says, and he acts like Obama, like someone like Josh Shapiro, I absolutely do think they could get immigration back because the majority of America is not where Trump is, and the majority of America wasn't where Biden was. So there is a very, very good place in the middle for a Democrat to come in. They looked for the other way because they wanted new citizens out to the voter. Yeah, yeah. I don't know about that. I don't know about I don't know about the voter roll thing. I don't you know, I don't think it's that big of an issue, the voter roll thing. But yeah, I think a lot of the I really do think there's a really big good position for the Democrats to take in the middle for this, and it could be a winning strategy for the Democrats in this particular thing. And then you tie that in with the economy, right? So you tie it all together in with the economy, right? Um, at the end of the day, actually, it was called Hillary Cares. She worked on it for 20 years, gave it to exactly, yeah. So yeah, Obama, Obama did. I think Obama did the best he could with what he had. Now, you could say Josh Shapiro is kind of, in my opinion, probably the closest to Barack Obama in terms of policy, and maybe like Josh Shapiro doesn't have the same charisma as Obama does. That's for sure. He doesn't have the same charisma as Obama, but they had struck an immigration bill that Biden would have passed, but Trump told them, yeah, exactly, money, exactly. You're right, money. But I will say it was too late. Yeah, by that time it was too late. The Democrats should have done something before then, because the once once a once a thing gets settled in, which is the Democrats did that, um, I think they were always going to lose that argument. Yeah, I think Joe Biden's yeah. So again, I agree with you that Trump tried to get away from that money, but yeah, too bad Shapiro has no riz. Yeah, T, I kind of agree with you, T. Yeah, there's not a lot. Josh Shapiro doesn't have a lot of charisma. Now, the thing about that is that he's probably going to be up against JD Vance, and JD Vance also doesn't have a lot of riz. So that could be a positive. That could be a positive too for JD for him, because two people with no riz. But at least Josh Shapiro is a Democrat, and it was late. Elon bought all the swing states, etc. And still, she didn't lose by much. Dem stayed home. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Look, if you look around the world in 2024, um, just about every incumbent government was kicked out because of inflation. Happened all around the world. His base hates JD. No, in fact, yeah. So I think I like Mike Haley better than Shapiro. Oh yeah, Mark Haley's really good. I like him too. Right has less population to target, and they have to aim for a win through the electoral college only. Yeah, exactly, Trish. Yeah, they do. Yeah, exactly. And I think someone like Josh Shapiro could could here's what I think the problem could be at the Democrats' primary, and that is the base might pick someone that people in California and New York want to win, like progressives. However, who would actually win an actual election might be someone who the base doesn't want to win. Yeah, so they're two different things. The base might pick someone who they want to win, but might not be that great for the electoral college vote. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. Um, here's the deal. If they start fixing this stuff enough to fool people, they might still vote private legislation. Worse, branch. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, exactly. You're right. You're right, Gen X. I agree so much. Yeah, I like Josh, but people are racist here in the US. Yeah. Um, but yeah. So again, I think we'll see what happens. Anyway, I have to go. Thank you so much, everyone. I thought I'd just do a quick Substack live today. I really appreciate everyone joining me. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you. Sorry you didn't get to see Nibbles today. Who were the pubs? Big Chump is not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Nibbles says goodbye as well. Thanks, Dave from California. See you, Marnie. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Carl. Thanks for joining. Appreciate that. Thanks, Joyce. Thank you so much. See you guys. See you next time. Thanks, Donna. Thank you. Thanks, Nicole.